One.
Hi, welcome. Welcome to our town hall on fighting for justice in Wisconsin. I'm Misty Rebick. I'm going to be helping to moderate today's event. I also worked with Senator Sanders in Iowa as the Iowa State Director and continue to work with him. So thank you so much for joining us. As you're joining, especially to those of you tuning in from Wisconsin, you'll have an opportunity to engage with each other and chat back and forth and let us know where you're from. So I'd like to encourage you right now. I see people joining the event to use your chat feature down at the bottom of your screen. Go ahead and drop your name in there and tell us where you're from, and I'll try to give a shout out to all the different folks joining us from across the state in Wisconsin. And meanwhile, to all the rest of you from across the country who are joining us today, you're joining our town hall and fighting for justice in Wisconsin. We are so excited to have you. For those of you who are tuned into our webinar, you'll also have a chance to ask our amazing panelists and special guests questions. So in order to do that, you will use the Q&A button towards the bottom of your screen. Throughout the program, you can submit any kind of question you have related to what we're talking about today. Please just give us your name and again, where you're from in Wisconsin, and we'll try to get to your question before the end of the show. We have a great panel lined up for you. We're going to be hearing from people on the ground all across the state of Wisconsin, union leaders, community leaders, and even a farmer to hear about what's been happening in Wisconsin, what we got to do to make sure Wisconsinites are getting the justice they deserve. And of course, we have our special guest, Congressman Mark Pocan and Senator Sanders. So again, welcome to everybody who's joining our show, our town hall, Fighting for Justice in Wisconsin. Let's see, we've got Sarah from Green Bay joining us, Pat and Jerry joining us from Toma, Wisconsin. I'm from Iowa, so I may mispronounce some of these names, towns as we go through. We have Bex from Madison. That's an easy one. I am not French either. Okay, so let me see. We got Sun Prairie, Colleen from Sun Prairie. It looks like we have Edward joining us also from Madison. All sorts of people joining us right now. Thank you for joining us from Wisconsin, and all of you across the country are joining us to hear about what is happening in Wisconsin. And with that, I will introduce our first panelist. He is the president of MASH, a union of service and hospitality workers fighting to secure union rights, living wages, and dignity for thousands of Milwaukee area service workers. Please help me welcome the president of MASH, Peter Rickman.
Thank you, Misty. First of all, let me just say it's been an honor of a lifetime to co-chair Senator Sanders' Wisconsin campaign with some of the folks here on this call. It's been an honor to serve twice as a delegate to the DNC convention for Senator Sanders as well, and to sit in the platform committee representing Wisconsinites who supported Bernie. So thank you for that opportunity, Senator Sanders. I just came from the Fiserv Forum in downtown Milwaukee. It's where the DNC convention would have been held. Our members were incredibly excited to host this convention and put a spotlight on the work that we're doing to transform service sector work in Milwaukee and across Wisconsin. They were excited also to not only show the world what they're doing, but what working people mean to our economy. We make this world work. Unfortunately, that convention never took place. And in fact, today is the first time in 4 months some folks are working in that arena. Only 50 out of 1,000 people who would normally work there are employed today. There's been no work because we've had a global pandemic. But the truth is, the pandemic didn't shut down the Fiserv Forum. It didn't shut down our economy. It's been the failure of leadership from President Trump, from Mitch McConnell, from Robin Vos here in Wisconsin. It's a failure of leadership and governance to move the policies that could protect public health and keep our economy working for working people. Instead of earning living wages, 1,000 people in downtown Milwaukee and tens of thousands of more across the state have been dealing with a broken unemployment system. It's been rigged against them. And that's the too common story of what's going on in our economy here. Service workers have borne the brunt of this pandemic, whether it's the tens of thousands who are unemployed or underemployed, employed even marginally, or the tens of thousands more who operate our hospitals as housekeepers and nurses, frontline folks on working as cleaners and security guards. These folks are essential, but they've been treated as expendable by Republican politicians and a boss class who've continued to gain wealth that we create while most working people in this country and right here in Wisconsin suffer. President Trump could have marshaled the resources and mobilized a nation to deliver personal protective equipment, provide hazard pay, and deliver healthcare for everybody, guarantee income replacement for those who are out of work, or even put people to work meeting public health needs. Instead, he and Mitch McConnell and Robin Vos have forced working class people to suffer. But the truth is, it's not like things were so great before COVID-19 hit. The Trump presidency has just been a disaster for working class people. And that's why we need to defeat him in November. We're going to make more progress on the Sanders agenda, pushing a Biden administration, than what we will play in existential defense in a proto-fascist Trump regime. Now, the reality is, even before Trump, things weren't so great for working class people. We've struggled for 4 decades. Wages have been stagnant. Living standards have declined. And, the truth is, income inequality has gone up to the highest level it's been since the Gilded Age that brought on the Great Depression. That's nothing new here. I grew up in Neenah, Wisconsin, a factory town, and I called the south side of Milwaukee home. And both of the places that I consider my homes have been decimated. 4 decades ago, these places teemed with living wage union jobs in factories and foundries, and they're gone. They're not coming back. They were destroyed by what FDR called economic royalism or free market fundamentalism, global finance capitalism, whatever you call it. It's the same ideology that has led not only to 4 decades of struggle for working class people, but also the Trump presidency, the Walker governorship, and this failure during COVID-19. It's the ideology that we have to defeat. And that's why we need a political revolution. This political revolution is not just about a presidency or one campaign. It's about fighting to deliver healthcare for all with Medicare for all. It's about defeating the existential threat that is global climate change with a Green New Deal. It's about free college. It's about unions and justice for all. It's about ending America's original sins of institutional racism and colonialism. This political revolution is giving thousands, tens of thousands, millions of working people hope across the country. And that's why it's so important that we're here today. This political revolution has never been about one person or one candidacy. As Bernie says, not me, us. And with our hands, we are going to remake this world. We're going to remake this country, and we're going to remake this state, starting right here, right now. The political revolution begins anew here today, and that's why I'm so thrilled to be with this incredible panel of people. And before I close and introduce our real guest of honor here, Senator Bernard Sanders of Vermont, I just want to say thank you, Bernie, for what you've done. Because the members I look in the eye when they tell me about their anxieties and struggles know that there is a real glimmer of hope, because we've got millions of people around this country fighting and building this political revolution because of your leadership. Thank you for your candidacies, your years of service to the working class. Thank you, Bernie. And let me turn it over to you. Bernie Sanders, everybody.
Well, Peter, thank you very much. Let me express my gratitude, not just to you, but to the brothers and sisters in MASH, trade unionists, and workers throughout the state of Wisconsin. I think everybody who heard Peter understands that we are living in an unprecedented moment in American history. It really is quite unbelievable. As Peter indicated, we're looking at a pandemic that has taken 170,000 lives, far more lives than should have been lost, but for the ineptitude of the Trump administration. We're looking at the worst economic collapse since the Great Depression. And all over this country, people have lost their job, they have lost their incomes, they've lost their health care. Today, they are not quite certain about how they're going to feed their kids in America. They're worried about being evicted from their homes and their apartments in America today. And then on top of all of that, top of the pandemic, on top of the economic meltdown, we got the unbelievably dangerous threat of climate change. And we're seeing that playing out. We're seeing that with the El Derecho taking place in Iowa. Devastating. We're seeing with the horrible, horrible fires taking place as we speak in California. Your earth is warming, more drought, more floods, more extreme weather disturbances. And we've got the struggle for racial justice in America, where millions of our people are saying enough is enough in terms of systemic racism. We've got to do away with bigotry. And then in the middle of all of that, you got a president who is a pathological liar. He lies every single day. Some 20,000 lies since he has been in office. You have a president who is a racist, who is a sexist, a homophobe, a xenophobe, a religious bigot. You got a president who does not believe in science. Here we are struggling with this pandemic, struggling with climate change. You got to reach out to the best scientists in the world. How do we transform our energy system? What do we do first? How do you deal with this pandemic? We need to look to doctors and scientists, and yet you got a president who rejects science. And then on top of all of that, you got a president who uniquely in American history really does not believe in our democracy. Brave men and women fought and died to preserve American democracy, to make sure that ordinary people, not just the rich and the powerful, have the right through the ballot box to determine the future of this country. And you got a president who every day is trying to undermine that democracy. He's trying to suppress the vote, make it harder for people to vote. The one area he was reasonably honest, as some of you recall last week, he said, yeah, we want to defund the Postal Service. We want to destroy the Postal Service in so many words so that people cannot engage in mail-in balloting. They can't cast their ballots through the mail. That's what he said. So this election is not just the most important in our lifetimes. This is truly the most important election in the modern history of this country. And the very future of our democracy is at stake. So short term, let me just very briefly, before we get it over to our great panel and to Congressman Pocan. In the very near future, what Congress has got to do is understand the pain that's out there. We got to continue to provide $600 a week in supplementary unemployment benefits for workers. We got to get those checks, those stimulus checks back into the families of this country. We've got to provide health care to all in this midst of this crisis. And we have got to protect the United States Postal Service. And I think Congressman Pocan, who is right now in Washington voting on this issue, will have something to say about that as well. But beyond the immediate crisis, as Peter mentioned, we have to understand that not all of these problems were created by Donald Trump. That before Trump was president, half of our people were living paycheck to paycheck. That tens of millions of people did not have health insurance. That our educational system for working class kids in many ways was unaffordable, and many left school deeply in debt. That the criminal justice system was racist and broken, immigration system totally broken, and that we are the only major country on earth not to guarantee health care to all people as a human right. So what we have got to do right now are just a number of things. First of all, between today and election day, and by the way, Wisconsin is in that. I don't have to tell anybody in Wisconsin, you are a battleground state. Trump won it last time. It may come down to Wisconsin. So all of you have got to do everything you can to get your coworkers, your family members to vote to defeat Trump and to elect Joe and Kamala as president and vice president. And then what we've got to do beyond that is after Joe Biden and Kamala are elected, what we have got to do is to push a progressive agenda. Peter talked about that agenda, an agenda that stands for working people, not just the 1%. So there is an enormous amount of work that has to be done, and we got to get going right now. With that, let me introduce to you, with great pride, one of the, and the people of Wisconsin should be very proud of this. You have in Mark Pocan, one of the leaders of the progressive movement in Congress, one of the outstanding members of Congress, somebody who has spent his life fighting for working people, for small business people. Mark, thank you so much for the work you're doing, and thanks so much for being with us this afternoon.
Well, thank you very much, Bernie. It really was an honor to travel around the country for you this spring, going to places like Iowa and Nevada and New Hampshire. You know, I just want to say thank you for running. Thank you really for building the movement that you've built, because that's how we're going to get all these things we care about done in the next session and with a new president. So, you know, I can't express my gratitude enough on behalf of everyone from Wisconsin. You have built something remarkable, and thank you so much for that. I am in DC. The video may not be great because it's hard to find a spot to do this off the hill, but close by for votes to try to save the Postal Service. Donald Trump has tried to create chaos by trying to damage the Postal Service to make people think their ballot won't count somehow. And in doing so, you know, he's hurting the veterans and seniors who get medication in the mail, the people who get their paychecks in the mail, the small businesses that rely on sending packages in the mail that are already hurt by the president's actions on COVID-19. And we need to stand up and do something. And we're doing that today on a very unusual Saturday in August in the House of Representatives, but we'll pass that bill probably in about 2 hours. So glad to be in DC, but sorry for any choppiness with video because of the internet connection. I wanted to give a state of play in Wisconsin. You know, we're a purple state. This is a state that we lost 4 years ago by less than 23,000 votes, a very, very tight margin. And yet we're the birthplace of Fighting Bob La Follette, you know, one of the greatest progressive leaders in our country's history, especially in the last century. And, you know, we had a 16 cycle that was very difficult. That's not going to happen this time. In fact, if you just look at 2018 as an example, I can tell you we took every constitutional office, statewide office in Wisconsin from governor on down. Granted, they all were about by 1%, except for Tammy Baldwin, Bernie, your great colleague, who's an outstanding progressive. She won by 11 points. And it really was her coattails that helped all the other Democrats get across the finish line. But we had 93% turnout in the city of Madison in 2018, just to give you an example. So we are going to do that in 2020. We're going to get the vote out everywhere, and we're going to take the state back. But we had difficulties in 2016. Honestly, the nominee never came back to Wisconsin after the primary. We were given no resources, and it caused about a 200 to 250,000 Democratic voter drop-off. Again, we won't have that. Our experience, especially from 2018, will ensure that's not going to happen. Also, just a little insider thing, but important, our new state party chair is a guy named Ben Wickler, who was the political director for Move On, who's an outstanding organizer and knows exactly how to get people out to vote, to get their ballots counted, and to organize from the grassroots up, not just put money on corporate TV and make consultants rich, but actually get organizers talking to people and getting them to vote. So we're going to be good in that sense. But let me tell you some other reasons I think why I think we're going to do especially well in 2020. One, Donald Trump lied. You know, he told people in Wisconsin, and we've been a state devastated by things like NAFTA and other bad trade deals. We've lost a lot of manufacturing jobs that have gone to Mexico and overseas. He said he's going to bring their jobs back, and people were desperate to have a good paying job again. And he didn't do that. And now people know that he lied to them. Our agricultural economy is in shambles. You're going to hear more of it in a little bit from Sarah Lloyd, but we've lost, I think we're leading the country in farm bankruptcies. And I think just in the last year, we've lost like 800 dairy farms because of the policies of this president. COVID-19, I don't even need to say very much on it other than this president's negligence and ineptitude and incompetence in dealing with COVID-19 has literally cost the lives of tens of thousands more people than would have died had it not been for his distraction from addressing this as the issue it is. And trust me, everyone in Wisconsin wants to make sure their family is going to be healthy and not die, which is another reason why Medicare for All is such an important bill and why we have to continue to build support and get that done in this country. We can't be the only industrialized country without universal health care, and yet we are. And again, Senator Sanders, your leadership on this has been tremendous. The reason it will be the law of the land in the United States someday is because of the work that you've put into it. And I just can't thank you enough for that. I also want to remind people in Wisconsin, our state legislative races are very important. we are only a few seats away from giving a veto-proof majority to the legislature. So when they pass a bad bill, the governor can veto it because we have a Democratic governor. But with just a few votes difference, they could block that veto. So we have to also watch our state legislative races very closely in Wisconsin to make sure that the gerrymandered legislature that we have doesn't have that power. In 2018, 54% of people voted for a Democrat for the state assembly, and yet we got 36% of the seats. So that's how gerrymandered we are. We just can't let that happen. And we have to make sure that we're helping Democrats who are running for the state legislature as well. And really, the last plea I have with folks is, we need to make sure that people get out and vote in November. We can't have what happened 4 years ago in Wisconsin. And Donald Trump is doing everything he can to create chaos to make sure that people are confused of whether or not their ballot will count. And maybe they should show up on election day instead. But we don't know what election day could look like thanks to Donald Trump. So here's what we need to do. One, if you haven't already, request your absentee ballot now. You will get it mid-September, about 6 weeks out from the election. When you get that ballot, fill it out right away. The candidates aren't going to change between the time you get your ballot and November 3rd. So let's get that ballot done. I think you can drop it in the mail at that point. You'll have 5+ weeks for it to arrive. But if you are watching at that point and there's still major problems with the Postal Service, thanks to Donald Trump's trying to create the chaos and dismantle them, then drop your ballot off at your city hall, your village hall, your town hall. It's going to get to the right people for election day. Many communities across Wisconsin, and this is new, are going to have boxes. In Madison, I think there's going to be 14 boxes, and it's going to be across the state in some major areas. A box you can drop your ballot in, and that's the same as going to vote on election day. So you can drop your ballot in there, and you can also vote in person at many of our early voting locations. But don't put it off. If you get it done right away, you can spend the remaining 5 or 6 weeks getting your friends, your neighbors, your coworkers to go vote in the same way, safely from their homes. And if we do that, we defeat Donald Trump twice. Once, we defeat him trying to create chaos and confusion around the ballot. And then when the votes are counted on November 3rd, we defeat him once again. I think that that's the promise we have. We just have to make sure we do everything we can as early as possible so those ballots are counted. So with that, we have a tremendous panel of people here today who are also strongly committed to all the ideals that Bernie Sanders has been committed to make sure we make these values a reality. And I get to first introduce Marcelia Nicholson. I got to make sure I'm saying that correct, and I do apologize. Marcelia Nicholson, who is the chairwoman of the Milwaukee County Board of Supervisors. I got my start, as did Tammy Baldwin, on the Milwaukee Board of Supervisors, so we have big expectations for you as well. That is a great job. You are the first Black woman and first Latina elected chairwoman of the Milwaukee County Board of Supervisors, Milwaukee, of course, being the largest community in Wisconsin. And she's led the effort to adopt policies that are important to working families across Milwaukee County. It's a real honor to introduce Supervisor Nicholson.
Thank you, Congressman Pocan. It's absolutely an honor to be here. And I have to plug Senator Tammy Baldwin, who did actually call me and congratulate me. And we talked about her time, her starting off on the county board. So Congressman Pocan, I'll be expecting a call from you soon. And I also just want to thank the Senator for just leading. And really, I was elected out of the movement you helped to build. So thank you for that. I'm also honored to have served as a Wisconsin co-chair and also a 2-time delegate to the DNC. I'm very honored to join this esteemed panel. So as chairwoman of the Milwaukee County Board of Supervisors, I've seen firsthand how Trump's failed response to the coronavirus pandemic, how it's impacted communities of color, and how Trump's GOP cronies in Congress have left our hardworking Wisconsinites behind and made it difficult for local jurisdictions to work for our constituents. As someone who grew up in the poor zip code in the state of Wisconsin and arguably the nation, that's the 53206 zip code, I take personally the plight in my community. Black and brown Americans have suffered and died from the coronavirus at rates far higher than white Americans. In Milwaukee, we account for more than half of the state's cases, with Black and brown people dying at disproportionate rates, including my goduncle, who survived the Vietnam War and died within a month of being diagnosed with the coronavirus. Endemic poverty, the lack of affordable housing, the lack of affordable healthcare, the attack on the public sector, the exploitation of our essential workers. They do precede the crisis, but they still contribute to the crisis. And our vision at Milwaukee County is to make Milwaukee County the healthiest county in the state of Wisconsin, but we are reckoning with the tragic human costs of systemic racism. And we have a president in office who thrives on these injustices. He uses them as talking points to incite his followers, and he makes no effort to rectify them. And we need someone in office who will put hardworking Americans first, regardless of zip code and regardless of race. And while we fight locally to keep our residents safe from this coronavirus pandemic, while we fight to provide the services that they need now and in the future to live healthy lives, the need for direct and flexible funding for state and local governments become even greater. For the last 10 years, because of Republican leadership, Milwaukee County has started off each budget cycle with a structural deficit of $25 to $30 million. We're already looking at a $42 million deficit. And when we put together our projected losses for revenue and closures, we're looking at a $400 million projection. Yet Republicans in Congress refuse to support localities and support a package that provides us the relief. If we can't get help from Congress to help meet our budgets, then our parks, which provide green space, our senior centers, which help keep our residents healthy, our transportation system, which connects our residents to jobs, to be able to go to the doctor, to be able to go to the grocery store. If we can't provide those mental health services, the housing services, and the social services, which helps level the playing fields for our most vulnerable residents, those all become at risk of being cut. Now, if we're going to effectively serve our communities, we need someone who cares about Black and brown people and who cares about helping our local communities thrive. Trump has failed us, and we deserve better. We deserve better today. We need you to get out and vote and get Trump out of office. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much. I really appreciate that. And I would love to talk to you anytime about the county board. It's a wonderful experience. And, it's so many people that I've served with in the legislature as well have been there. So I look forward to seeing really great things from you. Next, I'd like to introduce someone who I've known for a long time, Sarah Lloyd. Sarah Lloyd has a 400-cow dairy farm just outside the Wisconsin Dells that she runs with her husband and family. She's a member of the Wisconsin Farmers Union, and she serves as the vice president of the Columbia County Farmers Union, a great activist and a great spokesperson for agriculture and for farmers across Wisconsin. My honor to introduce Sarah Lloyd.
Thank you, and thanks for allowing me to be here. I'm here on my farm. My husband, Nels Nelson, and I farm with his parents and his brother, and they've been farming here for over 100 years, dairy farming. And like so many farmers, we are really struggling. We're struggling under the weight of low prices. I work off farm. My sister-in-law works off farm for health insurance. So we know the need for Medicare for all farm families, because we can't have insurance just tied to jobs. It doesn't work. But I want to just talk about what's been going on for farmers and trying to get a fair shot in the market, because Trump has not been effectively addressing the real issue. We can't make a living farming because the prices that we get paid for our milk, what corn farmers, soybean farmers get paid, they're too low. We've been lured over the decades as American farmers into greater reliance on global markets. So when Trump goes and tweets a trade war in the middle of the night, it knocks the feet out from under us. And so we have to scramble. But he doesn't go and work with his administration to actually fix the problems. He just tries to pay us off as farmers. And I don't want a payment from the government. I want a fair market. And one of the biggest issues in the agricultural markets right now is that the monopoly power of the corporations is squishing the farmers. So I buy things every day for the farm. I buy fertilizer, seed, supplies, feed. All of those companies are getting super concentrated and have massive monopoly power. So I can't compete for a decent price. Then I try to sell my milk and I sell my meat. And those companies that process, distribute, and retail my products are also super consolidated and are monopolists. And I, again, get a crappy price. I'm getting squeezed on both sides. We need an administration that's actually going to address that. And Trump is not doing that. He is just cuddling up with his monopolist friends and making it easier for them to run away with all the money and all the resources. So we need a change. And I just want to end by saying the other thing that we've seen with COVID that's so problematic is that meat packing workers. So it is essential for me as a farmer to be able to sell my products into the market. And I need workers who are healthy and safe to be able to process that. And the monopolist meat packers put their workers at risk, and Trump aided that and used the Defense Production Act to drive those people back into unsafe factories. As a farmer, that's not okay with me. I stand in solidarity with the workers, and we need an administration that's going to look out for family farmers so we can make a living, going to protect the critical workers that help me get food to you. And so I'm very glad to be here today to speak for farmers, to speak for rural communities. And we got to get out there, talk to our neighbors and friends. We can have an economy that actually supports farmers and communities. So thank you very much.
Well, again, thank you, Sarah. It is sad that America's Dairyland is leading the country in farm bankruptcies right now because of this president. And thank you so much for what you and the Farmers Union does in Wisconsin and across the country. Directly connected to what Sarah just said is something I'm going to mention as I introduce our next panelist, which is a great labor leader in Wisconsin representing a union that has represented many in those meat packing facilities and the grocery stores, people on the front lines who haven't had the protections that they need in these times of COVID-19, thanks to this president. And that labor leader is Jake Bailey. He's the newly elected Secretary Treasurer of the United Food and Commercial Workers Local 1473, where he represents workers across my state and the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. It's a real honor to introduce Jake Bailey.
Thank you, Congressman Pocan and Senator Sanders. I'm very honored to be a panelist and speaking for labor. The members of the UFCW Local 1473 have all been deemed essential workers throughout this pandemic. Our members are the heroes working in the meatpacking and food processing plants, the grocery stores, and the nursing homes across Wisconsin. Our members have not been given the basic PPE they need to stay protected. And we have been giving nothing but toothless guidance from the CDC and OSHA that can't be enforced and allows companies a get out of jail free card. Despite these challenges, the UFCW Local 1473, through the leadership of President John Iden, took the task on and has bargained strict COVID policy language in all of our plants, grocery stores, and nursing homes. Some of the language in these policies include mandatory masks, social distancing, plexiglass barriers, temperature taking prior to entry, and additional break rooms. And in some locations, we have mandatory COVID-19 testing. The union took this action to protect our members with no playbook and no federal guidance. Due to the lack of leadership at the federal level, we unfortunately watched our members get sick. Some of them get hospitalized, and some of them die. This just didn't need to happen. We could have been prepared and had the PPE and the testing supplies that we needed. We could have had strict rules for these companies to follow and to keep our members safe, not just guidance. We could have had compliance officers that had the ability to penalize these bad actors in these packing plants. We need leadership that is going to stand up for essential workers and not protect large companies. We believe we would have had far less members contract the virus if we would have had the same leadership we had in Governor Tony Evers at the federal level. Also, many of the essential workers in the packing industry are immigrant workers and are also under attack because we don't have fair immigration reform. Our local just negotiated an unprecedented settlement for workers fired from a meat packing plant due to their immigration status in this country. The settlement was worth over $264,000 in severance, and it included the right to return to work within 24 months with their seniority and all contractual guarantees. Unions are currently the top watchdog for immigrant rights on the job, but immigration reform needs to be a top priority for the next 4 years so that everyone has the opportunity to succeed and thrive in this country. Thank you for allowing me to speak.
Thank you very much, Jake, for all you're doing on behalf of working people, you and the UFCW. I am nearly a 30-year member of the Painters and Allied Trades, so very appreciative of all that we do in organized labor on behalf of workers in Wisconsin. So thank you for that. It's now my honor to introduce someone who's a great community activist. Daryl Gibson is a lifelong resident of Milwaukee, and he's the managing director for Leaders Igniting Transformation. That's a nonprofit that works to organize a political and cultural bloc of young people across the state of Wisconsin. Thank you so much for all your organizing you do, and it's my pleasure to introduce Daryl Gibson.
Thank you, Congressman Pocan, for the great introduction and the work you're doing on the Hill on this lovely Saturday back home here in Wisconsin that you're missing out on. But I'm here to speak about change. And we've heard multiple times how Trump and the Republican Party has called changes in this country, but have been detrimental to the advancement of the citizens and the families and the communities that we live in. My grandfather, blessed to turn 80 years old this past June. And this year has probably been a stressful year, the most stressful year as a grandson, as a son, with the COVID pandemic. Because I understand, I know, and experience firsthand what it's like to be African-American in this country and it being a death sentence. The results we see in our communities based off the lack of preparedness, the lack of accepting intelligence, the lack of just accepting common sense science around this pandemic, around climate change, around the ills that are ailing our country from this president and from the Republican Party are directly impacting my community, my family, my friends, and even my life. Change is something that occurs by action. And in the process of change, and we're talking about political change and regiment change and ideology change, voting is the start of that process. And don't get me wrong, voting is not the only part of changing what we need to change in this country, but it's an essential starting point of that entire process. We have to challenge ourselves to get uncomfortable. We have to challenge ourselves to know more. We have to challenge ourselves to hold those in power accountable, and voting is that way. We are here as a country, as citizens, as a community, in a pivotal point right now. We can continue to do the harm, and we continue to move forward in the dispiriting facts of the country, of the state of Wisconsin, which has multiple times been asked and been led to be the worst place for African-American families to grow up in, or put a fork in the road and go a different direction. We can invest in climate change. We can invest in proper healthcare for our communities. We can invest and stop putting away Black fathers and Black mothers in a prison system that's there to monopolize off their serving their time. We do that by changing who we have in the president, who we have in Congress, who we have as state representatives, and who we have in local officials. But we can't do that change. We can't start that process if we didn't do our part and go out and vote. As you sit here, I challenge you to really think about how you're going to participate in this pivotal moment in this country. Are you going to be on the sidelines to point out everything that's wrong, to say that President Trump is the problem, the Republicans are the enemies, but don't even take the effort to fill out an absentee ballot? Don't think about your voting process or voting plan when it comes to election day. Or are you going to do that part that is needed? Educate yourself on the candidates. Educate yourself on the issues. and vote for the right people to lead this country forward. My grandfather always said one thing: when we all do good, we all do good. And right now, and for a long time, and for generations, I'm sad to say we haven't been all doing good, but that could change. It changed with us, it changed with our actions, and it starts with that vote. So I ask you and I challenge you, do the right thing, do the challenging thing, but do it for the future. Stand, vote, and make this country and state a better place.
All right. Thank you, Daryl. That was very moving. Thank you for sharing your thoughts and concerns and your story. Very powerful. We're going to move into the Q&A section of the event, and I have a question queued up. This comes from Trent Schultz. Trent asks, how do progressives coalesce to convince moderates and the Democratic establishment that Medicare for All and a Green New Deal need to be passed in the Biden presidency? Trent writes us from Madison. Senator, you want to take that one?
Sure. Trent, we have in the last number of years enjoyed enormous momentum in making the case to people throughout this country, and in the last few months even more so, that healthcare is a human right and not just a job benefit. We are winning the struggle. And as Congressman Pocan mentioned a few minutes ago, we are going to pass Medicare for all sooner or later. We want it to be sooner. And the way we reach out to our friends and our neighbors is to make the case, number one, do you think that the function of healthcare should be to provide billions of dollars in profits for the insurance companies and the drug companies who charge us the highest prices in the world for prescription drugs? Or do you think we should have a quality healthcare system for all people? And the point we make is we remain the only major nation on earth not to guarantee healthcare to all. I am sitting right now in Burlington, Vermont, 50 miles away from the Canadian border. And somehow in Canada, for many decades, they have managed to provide quality care for all people. When you go to the doctor, when you go to the hospital, you don't take out your wallet. There is no such thing as medical bankruptcy in Canada. Freedom of choice. And yet at the end of all that, they spend about half as much as we do per capita on healthcare. So what I would say to Brett is this is not really a debate over healthcare. This is an economic debate and a political debate taking on the healthcare industry, which has spent billions of dollars over the last 20 years in lobbying and campaign contributions. They're doing phenomenally well, while 90 million Americans are uninsured or underinsured. Healthcare is a human right, not a privilege, not a job benefit. And the American people increasingly understand that. Our job is to mobilize the American people and really to say enough is enough. I am entitled, my kids are entitled, my parents are entitled to go to any doctor they want, not have to take out their credit card or their wallet, not worry about going bankrupt for some outrageous medical bill. We're going to have a Medicare fund healthcare for all. We are winning that battle. Let's develop the movement to take us over the goal line.
Great. Our next question comes from Sarah Riley. Sarah asks, what can we do about water quality? So many cities and rural families are concerned about runoff from farms, I think probably mostly referring to agribusiness farms, and the sludge they spread on fields near homes. Sarah, Congressman, what are your thoughts on that?
I can jump in here. Thanks for that question. It's a very serious issue, and we're really seeing it in Wisconsin. You know, one of the things we obviously at the state level need to make sure that we believe in science and we have the teeth behind the regulations that exist. But the other thing that we need to do is make sure that farmers can make a living so that they don't have to feel forced to get bigger. Because a lot of what you're seeing is farmers are running on a treadmill with low prices, and their only choice is to expand to try to just keep eking out a tiny living. And so that's putting more and more pressure with more and more cows in one place and leading to these water quality issues. I really believe that if we paid farmers a fair price, we wouldn't see this huge explosion of big farms. We need to maintain a system of farmers all across the land that can manage their manure responsibly. And we do need both federal and state regulations and enforcement. And we know that Trump is trying to take away the teeth, and at the state level, the Republican controlled legislature is not supporting proper enforcement. So that's another reason, vote for water. It's essential.
I would just add, I completely associate myself with all of Sarah's remarks, what the president has done to the Environmental Protection Agency and other agencies on their regulatory functions. He's really stopped them from doing the enforcement we need to around the environment. And we need to change that when we have a new president, because it's been disastrous. But also I want to mention one other thing about water quality. And that's something that my good friend Rashida Tlaib and others have been so outspoken on is, the water in Flint, Michigan. When I went to Michigan and saw what's happening there, we need to invest in our infrastructure. The American Society of Civil Engineers has given us a D+ grade. Say we need $4.6 trillion to bring our infrastructure up to speed. And a lot of that is to put in new pipes and lines that allow people to drink clean water. So I think environmental regulation and following science, in addition to investing in our infrastructure so that people can drink clean water, we have to add that to any discussion about water.
Thank you, Congressman. Our next question, we've actually had a few questions coming from different folks in Wisconsin, one from Richard, one from Donna, just asking about gerrymandering. Richard says, can we pass a nationwide bill to outlaw any form of gerrymandering forever? Donna says, gerrymandering, exactly. What is being done? What can be done to remedy this? Can someone on the panel help our viewers who may not be familiar with the term gerrymandering, explain what that is, and then what can we do about it? Senator Sanders, you want to take this one?
Sure. What gerrymandering is creating voting districts, congressional districts, which benefit a particular party. So what you can have is you maneuver districts so that 80, 90% of the people in the district will vote Democratic, rather than have two districts which will elect Democratic representatives. Gerrymandering is not a new concept. It's gone on since the beginning of this country. But what has happened is that in recent years, our Republicans have taken it to a whole new level, drawing absolutely insane lines that have nothing to do with real districts, but are just developed in order to make sure the Republicans can get elected to the state legislature or to the United States Congress. I think when we talk about reforming our political system, when we talk about getting money out of politics, when we talk about one person, one vote, we must be talking about gerrymandering reforms. And one of the ways that states are doing it is creating bipartisan organizations, bringing people together, Republicans and Democrats, outside of the immediate political process to develop what are rational districts for those states. But there's a lot more that has to be done, because as I think Mark Pocan was pointing out earlier, and Mark, you may want to pick up on this, what you saw in your elections, as I heard you, in Wisconsin, is Democrats won a majority of the votes, but they did not win a majority of the seats. Do you want to pick up on that?
Absolutely. Glad to, Bernie. 54% of the people voted for a Democrat for the state assembly, and yet we got 36% of the seats. clearly that shows the gerrymandering. It's really, I explain it one sentence, it's politicians picking their voters rather than voters picking their elected officials. And so by drawing and manipulating the lines, that's what happens. The good news is twofold for the questions. One, yes, in HR 1, the most comprehensive elections, campaign finance, and ethics bill ever passed in Congress that we did in the House this year, it does have measures to curtail any gerrymandering that can happen. So yes, we can have legislative effect on it. And two, in Wisconsin, Governor Evers is doing exactly what Bernie just suggested, having a citizen panel of people, not politicians, drawing the lines. And that is what they do in Iowa and other places. It's by far the best. And I think we need to really support any efforts the governor has to try to do that for Wisconsin, because that's all going to happen in the next 2 years.
Thank you, Congressman. Our next question comes from Peter Jackson. Peter writes us from the town of Dunn. He says, what do we do to ensure a free and fair election with an authoritarian president who will try and steal the election? And what might be called on all of us? What do we need to do between now to make sure that our votes are counted? And then what do we do between November and January to make sure if Biden wins that he gets into the White House?
Can I take this one, Misty?
Sure.
Yeah. I think it's real simple. We have to fight. We have to go to war. Like I said earlier, our future of our country is really important. And the best way to hold elected official accountable is to let them know you're there. Let them know you're paying attention, and let them know you're going to show up. That's why Grassroots is so important in this accountability and change methods. And not only that, you have to bring people with you. We all have friends, we all have families, we all have people that we interact with that we know are on the sidelines. We need everyone hands on deck because we're all impacted by this authoritarian type of leader we're having. And sad to say, if and hopefully not, but if he's reelected, well, only power and ego is going to come with that reelection, right? Having foresight, having perspective. But it simply comes down, we have to fight. We can't lay down. We can't take breaks. Unfortunately, that's where it is. And I'd love to get to a point where we're not saying we need to vote, but like we need to show up to district offices. That's the next big ask. But, if you look at the history of this country, every change has come from folks standing up and not laying down. There's hopeless at times, to be honest, but doesn't mean that we should stay hopeless. And it goes with like letting the world know and letting your leaders know that we're here. We're not going to let you pass. We're not going to let you squeak by. We're not going to let you continue this leadership that is harming us. And you do that by standing up, being present, being heard, being loud, and fighting.
Well, let me just add to what Darrell just said, because he's absolutely right. But I want everybody to understand, when Trump rants and raves about how this is going to be a rigged election, it's a scam, Democrats are going to stuff ballot boxes, all that he is saying is laying the groundwork for when he loses to say, oh, this wasn't a fair election. I told you that. That's what he's doing. This is ugly. This is unprecedented. This is the president of the United States undermining American democracy. So picking up on Darrell's point and Mark Pocan's point, we have got to come out and vote in record-breaking numbers. You got to request that absentee ballot, that mail-in ballot early, get it back early. And if you want to vote on election day, make sure you're bringing your friends and your neighbors as well. We have a president who is not only at war with the working class of this country, but this is a president who does not believe in democracy. And he's trying to confuse people. And our job is, in fact, to remind Donald Trump what democracy is right now and on November 3rd. And what democracy is having the largest voter turnout in the history of this country and making sure we throw Donald Trump out of office.
Thank you, Senator. We have a little bit of time for a few more questions. I think this one's great. We had a really strong panelist here from labor. So this comes from Elizabeth, who just recently relocated to Wisconsin due to COVID. And Elizabeth is asking or saying, I am shocked that I am expected to work for 16 hours with no duty-free lunch break. What can we do to improve labor laws here in Wisconsin? Jake or Peter, do you all have thoughts on that?
I mean, I do have some thoughts. I mean, I think we need to get out and vote. That's one thing. I mean, we can't change labor laws without having officials that understand the working class people. And, we're in these facilities, Peter and myself, on a daily basis, fighting for these protections. I mean, what we saw 4 months ago and how the plants operated 4 months ago, and I'm sure it's the same for Peter, it is night and day different what these people are walking into. And we need to have officials that come from the working class that understand our daily struggles of just being able to eat lunch in a 15 or 20 minute window and then go back into these difficult conditions, whether it's with customers or whether it's, cutting meat. We just need to vote people in that understand us and understand what labor needs, I guess.
Yeah, Misty, if I could get in on that. I want to steal a line of analysis from one Bernie Sanders. 4 years ago, 5 years ago, the idea that we would raise the minimum wage, double the minimum wage to 15, was considered entirely radical and out of the bounds of possibility. And now across the country, 20% of working class people are covered by a minimum wage of $15 an hour or more. And we have a powerful movement that's been in the streets and then brought it to the ballot box in the halls of government. And that's what we need to continue to do to ensure that every working person in America has a living wage. And by the way, 15 is not enough. We need to push that even further. But it's a model for what we can do to transform our labor and employment laws. Unfortunately, our right to form a union, a basic fundamental right, is a condition on a labor law that was written closer to the Civil War than it is to today, 85 years ago. And it's utterly broken, and it keeps working people from having the collective power we need to balance things out with the boss in our workplaces, in the economy. If we can transform federal labor law to balance the power up between workers and bosses, we can win not only things like decent working conditions and hours, but living wages and demands for even more, the sort of benefits that once underpinned a middle class in this country. We built the world's first middle class through unions. So I think we need to follow the model of what's come out of the Fight for 15 movement by getting in the streets, by organizing in our workplaces and taking it to the streets, and then translate it, as Jake said, to the ballot box and then bring it to the halls of government. We can do that here in this country. We know that it works. It's our history going back 80 years to when we built the world's first middle class, with working class people taking on the boss class with a powerful demand that can't be ignored and bringing it into the political arena so folks in government take action. So I think we have a model, but we're going to need to build this political revolution from Waukesha County and outward across Wisconsin and throughout the United States.
Thank you, Peter. And I just wanted to comment on the local level because we have Marcelia, who is a recently elected Board of Supervisor member. And I know in Iowa, when we were strapped with a Republican governor and a president who was doing nothing for workers' rights, we ran campaigns to raise the minimum wage at the county level and depended on our local electeds who were great and progressive to help out workers. So Marcelia, do you have any thoughts on that? Is there something that we could be doing at the local level to help workers out while we're trying to also flip the Senate, and elect a Democrat president?
Absolutely. Thank you for that question, Misty. So it's very important to state, when I was elected into my first term in 2016, one of the first things I did was pass a $15 living wage ordinance for Milwaukee County employees and contractors. Unfortunately, our Republican majority state legislature actually preempted that bill. And that's something we're contending with at the local level, preemption. It's a heavy and evil force. Republicans are dead set on making sure that localities like mine can't give our constituents the tools they need to thrive. And so what I've done since then is joined in with organizations like MASH. I'm serving as vice president to help win, $15 living wages for developments, making sure that we're implementing community benefits agreements, working across jurisdictions actually at the city level and with state legislatures, our allies in the state legislature, to make sure that we can support local groups fighting for a living wage. stand up, call your county supervisors, call your state legislators, call your congresspersons, and let them know that you support a living wage. The main thing that you can do is let it be known that you support this, because what Republicans will state is that no one supports this. No one wants to raise wages, but we know that's not true. So we need you to stand up. We need you to be loud. We need you to be vocal, because I can't do the work unless I have you all behind me. And so that's what we're doing in Milwaukee. I'm working with county boards across the state to make sure that we can also implement similar ordinances, and that they can also support organizations that they have fighting for a living wage. And really, it's just going to take all hands on deck to make sure that we make this a central issue, and that we hold not only our incoming president to that, but also those that are running for office at the local and state level, to make sure that they support that issue as well. Thank you, Misty.
Welcome. We only have time for one more question. I've seen this come up in the chat. This comes from, I lost the name, so I'm just going to say it. What is being done to support a full census count? Since the census matters so much, the sort of services that folks get in their communities. So I'll throw that to you, Senator, and to Congressman, since you obviously have a grasp on this one.
Well, look, like everything else, Trump would like to undermine the census. Because if the true number of people of color, of poor people, is not counted, those states, those communities will get fewer federal resources. Our job is to make sure that every person in this country is counted, is to cooperate with the census takers, and to make sure that districts throughout this country who historically have been underfunded get the funding they desperately need. Mark, on that issue, what's going on in the House?
This is one where we're trying to stop what Donald Trump is doing. He's trying to end the door-to-door part of the census early. He's doing everything he can to do just what you talked about, the attacks on that. And, just so everyone understands why, one of the reasons it's so important is for every person that's not counted over a 10-year period, that's a loss of about $20,000 to any local community in assistance that they would otherwise get from the federal government. So it really affects your neighborhoods, your communities, the quality of life. And Donald Trump is trying to manipulate that like he's done on so many other things. So, we really need to be loud and be active and reach out to the senators and your member of Congress and make sure that you're being heard. I think a theme for many of the issues today is something I used to print on bumper stickers for my campaign. If the people lead, eventually the leaders will follow. That's what Bernie's campaign has been about, to build this movement. And I think, if we all take that to heart on any issue, but especially on the census, reach out and use our voices.
Thank you, Congressman. So thank you so much to all of you in Wisconsin who submitted your questions. We didn't get to all of them, but we really, really appreciate it. And now I want to turn it back to Peter to tell us, what can we do? If you're in Wisconsin, what can you do? How can you take action? I also just want to say, we have a bunch of union leaders and activists and leaders on this webinar. It's so important to get involved locally in organization. That's the number one thing you can do. As someone who comes from movement politics myself, you got to get involved and stay involved. So with that, Peter, what else can people do?
Well, across the state of Wisconsin, there's an unprecedented voter mobilization happening. And so each of us has to do our part. And it starts, as Daryl said, with voting. And a number of folks have mentioned this. I'm going to give you a basic call to action here right now, something you can do while you're on your computer right now. I want everyone to remember the 3 R's and go to myvote.wi.gov. That information is right on your screen. There's the 3 R's. First of all, register. You can check your registration status on myvote.wi.gov. Second, you can request your absentee ballot to be sent to you, as Mark said, and get it right away. And that's the 3rd R then. Return it as soon as you get it. The 3 R's: register, request, return. You can do that at myvote.wi.gov. And as soon as you're done doing that, we need you to stand up to support the Postal Service. Now, we got to protect the Postal Service so folks can vote, so it's there so we can build it and do things like postal banking, like Bernie's talked about on the campaign trail. I'm going to give you a phone number here so you can call Ron Johnson. We got to raise hell with Ron Johnson. That's the 4th R here today. So I want you to call. I'm going to read this number out to everyone, and you can write it down. 202-220-8282. 202-224-5323. Again, that's 202-224-5323. I want you to call Ron Johnson and tell him that you demand that the Postal Service not only stop the cuts to the Postal Service, but that they roll back the changes that they've made. That's how we'll all get a fair chance to vote in this election. It's how we'll protect our democracy and ensure this incredible public institution is around for generations to come. So thank you, Misty. Thank you, Bernie Sanders, for bringing us here together to make sure that we continue the fight and keep building this political revolution here in Wisconsin. It's how we'll take our state back. It's how we'll take our country back and transform it into the kind of just and democratic society all working people deserve. Thank you again, Bernie, and let me give it back to you to close things out.
Okay. Peter, thank you very much for the great work you're doing. And let me thank Congressman Pocan for his leadership role in the Congress, and Marcelia, and Sarah, and Jake, and Daryl for what you're doing and for your participation in this discussion today. You heard it from everybody. This is the most important election in modern history. You don't have a reason. You don't have a valid excuse for not participating. If you're concerned about your kids, if you're concerned about your parents, if you're concerned about making a living, if you're concerned about affordable housing, if you're concerned about the future of this planet, if you're concerned about whether or not you're going to be able to afford to go to a doctor or be able to pay for the prescription drugs your doctor prescribes, if you're concerned about criminal justice and having more people in jail than any other country on earth, or a broken immigration system, if you're concerned about whether or not as a young person you're going to be able to get a college education without coming out of school $50,000 in debt, whether you're concerned about having a government that you are proud of, not embarrassed of, you know what? You got to vote. No excuses. You have got to vote. And when your friends say, well, you know, we don't want to vote, it's all a waste of time, you look them in the eye and tell them that the future of American democracy, the future of the planet, is at stake. Nobody has an excuse not to vote or not to get involved. So we are at a momentous moment. Wisconsin is one of the key battleground states. Trump won it last time by a relatively small number of votes. Democrats are making good progress in reversing what happened, did well in 2018. The future of America, and I say this without exaggeration, late on election night, people may be looking at what's happened in Wisconsin, because the question of who will become president may rest on the people of Wisconsin. And you don't want to, at 2 o'clock in the morning, find out that Trump won Wisconsin by 5,000 votes. So our job from Milwaukee to Madison to all over the state, stand up, fight back, vote. Let us have the highest voter turnout in the history of Wisconsin, in the history of America. We do that, Trump is history. So we've got a lot of work to do from now until election day. Let's do it. No excuses. Thank you all.